And recording.
Should wait for these people to sit down, perhaps. I hope you guys in the back will take a seat. We'd love to get started.
All right, folks, we're going to get started. For folks in the back, take a seat, please. Thank you.
It's a gift. They can sit. They have their backs to us. Maybe they're making a statement. Can everyone hear me? Is this live? Okay, great. All right, let's get going here. This hearing of the New Mexico Department of Health Medical Cannabis Advisory Board will now come to order. I would like to welcome you to the public hearing to review petitions requesting the inclusion of medical conditions or diseases to the list of debilitating conditions currently eligible for licensure under the Medical Cannabis Program. Pursuant to notice, this matter is being heard this 7th day of December 2018 at the Harold Reynolds Building. The time is approximately 10:08 a.m. I am Dr. Laura Brown, Chair of the Medical Advisory Board, and I will be managing the hearing today. Department of Health Assistant General Counsel Chris Woodward will be advising the department in this proceeding. This proceeding is being held in accordance with the Lynn and Aaron Compassionate Use Act, Sections 26-2B-1 through 26-2B-7, NMSA 1978, and regulations at NMAC Title 7, Chapter 34, Part 2. If members of the audience have not already done so, please sign the attendance sheet located at the entrance of this auditorium. And if you would like to make public comment, you need to sign in as well to do that. Thank you. All right, we will proceed with, let's see, here we go. Call to order, introductory comments, board member introductions.
I'm Dr. Baylin Schwartz. I'm a board-certified physiatrist with a subspecialty in pain medicine.
I'm Dr. Annette Fontaine, a medical oncologist.
Good morning. Again, I'm Dr. Laura Brown. I'm a family physician focusing on addiction medicine.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Calder, board-certified neurologist.
Hi, I'm Rachel Goodman, OBGYN.
Hi, I'm David Woog, board certified in anesthesia and pain.
So after the introductions, I think it's my job to approve the agenda that we've already published. There's a copy of it back there if anybody hasn't already picked up a copy. I would like to consider the addition of a bit of information about the Senate Memorial 105 Legislative Task Force report, which was just heard in the New Mexico legislature. And so I will speak about that. That will be added to today's agenda for a brief statement. Okay, so next on our agenda, we have an item, actions of the Secretary of Health on previously submitted Medical Cannabis Advisory Board recommendations from our most previous meeting, which was September 7th of 2018. And the Medical Cannabis Advisory Board report from this meeting was just submitted yesterday. So not surprisingly, we have not yet heard back a response from the Secretary of Health given this very short time frame. Anything to say about that? Okay, let's keep going here. All right. Next on our agenda, we have a medical cannabis program update. Kenny, would you like to provide that?
Yes.
Thank you.
Good morning. Can you guys hear me back there? All right, so we have a couple things to go over. First, I'm Kenny Vigil. I'm the program director. Okay. So we just wanted to go over stats, and I'm going to place them here. Our November stats are at 66,725.
Wow.
When we published our October report, there was an error in the report, which we noticed there was an increase of 7 from the end of September. So we've been working with our software vendor to get that issue resolved. And so the new end of October numbers were 62,889. So again, very rapid growth. Just like to thank the staff again, folks who were here, folks who were back at the office for their time and effort. I think it's important to point out, I sound like a broken record. They've been working overtime evenings and Saturdays to keep up with the demand. And I think that is a good transition for the next topic, which is vacancies. So we are facing some challenges with vacancies. We're budgeted for 28 positions. We have 9 vacancies right now, and I have someone out on leave. So essentially, we've been operating with 10 vacancies. Out of those 9 actual vacancies, we're working to recruit for 6 positions actively. The other 3 we have to prioritize and figure out what's mission critical for what we're doing. And did you have a?
I do. Do you have a list of what the specific positions are? I know one of them is Tyler Muxworthy's previous position as the environmental scientist.
Yeah, so I'll break down the positions by the Santa Fe office. So we have a data entry clerk. We have 2 info and records clerks. Those positions are really mission critical to processing patient applications. We have a budget analyst, we have a clerk, and a customer service supervisor.
Okay.
And so in the Albuquerque office, we have a compliance officer, the environmental scientist, and a health and safety specialist position vacant. I think it's important to point out that we're doing everything we can to fill those vacancies. We had selected 3 candidates for 3 separate positions, and each of those candidates ended up declining, so we had to start all over again. So it's disappointing when we go through the interview process and go through the approval to get someone approved to hire and make an offer, and then it's turned down. I'm
hoping, for the sake of the program, that with the new gubernatorial administration coming in the new year, that New Mexico Department of Health hiring processes will be expedited from previous, and things will open up in a positive, productive direction for you all.
Right, and there were some changes in systems that were used for hiring in the summer, and there's just sort of been a cascading effect that they're trying to rectify, I think, but it is slow, and then when you get an approval, it's a little frustrating, to have to start all over again with the job posting.
Right.
We did hire a new staff manager to oversee patient services. His name is Darren Casados. Fortunately, he's not here with us today. He's also a high school basketball coach and had a prior commitment with them. So he is sorry that he couldn't be here, but we're happy to get that position filled. On the licensing compliance side, we're up to 86 dispensaries, and we have several amendments for new locations, so they're keeping that process very fluid and moving forward. And I believe my last update is that we did release an RFP for a software system. We're really focused on getting electronic patient applications launched, and so that the RFP was released on November 30th. So we'll see how that works out for us. We're hopeful.
I did have two quick questions. I was wondering, do you have a count of how many current medical cannabis clients are under the age of 18? We have a lot of interest in the medical cannabis advocate community around use of medical cannabis among school-age students, and hearing about it a lot around the state. And so this is a pretty hot issue. And so I was wondering if you had any information about that.
We can pull that information. In fact, we have a request, so we're working to get that.
Okay.
And we'll provide that.
Any ballpark estimate?
I wouldn't want to. I really don't know.
Okay.
It's been a while since we've taken a look at that.
And then the other thing I wanted to ask about, any reports or concerns from law enforcement?
No, I mean, the law enforcement line, I think, goes through peaks and valleys. Some nights it's not busy, some nights it's very busy. And so, no specific concerns or trends identified. I think most of the calls center around, just to verify that the patient is active and what they're allowed to possess seem to be.
And you said no specific trends in terms of like pattern of calls or number of calls or types of calls?
No, I mean, I think they're basically just the verification.
And for purposes of education of the Medical Cannabis Advisory Board, can you give us an estimate of how many calls per year you guys get in your log?
You know, we don't log it, so what we do is when there's an active patient that is called about, we log that information in the patient profile.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't really have a stat available, but I would say that there are nights where you can get no calls and there are nights where you can get 6 calls. There can be weekends where you're very, very busy and weekends where you call the phone to make sure it's working. So it really just depends.
And again, for purposes of education of us, many of us fortunately are new to this board. Who handles these calls? I mean, is it a rotating call schedule among the staff of the medical cannabis program, or is it a specific call center, or how does that work?
Yeah, so we have a little cell phone. I guess it's in the pocket and forwarded to Marty. So the on-call rotation is Andreas Sundberg, Martin Gonzalez, and I.
Okay.
And so
Okay.
law enforcement gets one of us.
Right. Got it. Any questions about that?
I watched another question. If you go to electronic applications, will you still have paper applications as an option?
Absolutely.
Okay. But it might have to be a hard thing for access for some people.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And is there any update on kind of the schedule of that happening?
So we just released the RFP, and I believe that the responses are going to be due sometime in January.
Okay.
I mean, we're really hoping, I would like to say fall of 2019,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a lot of different elements at play. One of the plans is to maybe phase out the on-call phone with that and allow law enforcement access to a portal where they can verify that. There may still need to be some kind of mechanism for those oddball situations to be available, but that's part of the bigger picture plan.
Okay.
So Kenny, this might not be the appropriate time for this question, but in terms of mining the data either in BioTrack or your new system to say, hey, what strains is someone using with Alzheimer's or chronic pain, and what is their response? I mean, I want to mine the data for some medically relevant fields. Is that included in this scope?
I'm not sure that specific item is, but one of the things that we know we have to do is we need better data. So we've been trying to work with the current system, and we've been doing some stuff internally to try to collect data. So we know that we need more access to the raw data to start looking at things differently.
Excuse me, Kenny?
Yes?
Would it be a HIPAA violation for law enforcement to have access to that database?
That's one of the things that we'll look at.
All right, thank you.
Yep, absolutely.
Yes, Kenny, how many people have responded to the RFP?
None at this
Excuse me
time.
one moment. You all are, of course, welcome to ask questions, but please state your name for the record. So
Larry Love.
Yeah, I got it. And I didn't get the second person, please.
Keith Grider.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Andrea Ginger Grider.
Thank you.
Two things were on the pediatric patients. There is a Health and Human Services Committee meeting today for a bill at 3:30. I can't remember what room it's in. I'll find out. But anyone who would like to attend, please come to hear that. And then on the law enforcement, Kenny, could you explain kind of the processes, what happens, and that because a lot of patients don't know that there's a number on the back of the card, and through the Alliance, we do get a lot of complaints from patients saying, yes, I was stopped, they took my medicine, they didn't arrest me, they didn't care if I had a card, they wouldn't call the number on the back of the card, and they have no recourse. So we need something for patients, because we're getting patients who are losing their medicine to law enforcement 2 or 3 times a month.
Just because.
And that's just the people who reach out to us. We don't, we can't know who's not reaching out, but the ones who are reaching out, and then they say they call DOH and they're like, too bad. Now I don't know, I can't verify, but this is what I'm being told from the patient community.
Well, there's a couple of points, right? So, like you said, the patient registry card has the law enforcement number in the back. My experience has been that even if an individual is in possession of cannabis and they don't show the card, that they will let law enforcement know that they have a card, and law enforcement, either through dispatch or directly contacts us, and then we do that search. So, I can't speak to what happens outside of those other parameters, but if we need to do a better job of awareness of that law enforcement number, that's something we're willing to work on. We can advise law enforcement what to do in situations when an individual doesn't have a card, but that's why we're there, to be able to say, yes, they're in the system, or they're no longer active, or whatever the case may be. You're welcome.
The hearing is in room 322 at the Roundhouse at Senate Plaza and Old Santa Fe Trail.
Did everybody hear that? The hearing today that Ginger has mentioned is that in 322 of the Roundhouse today at 3:30. Thank you.
The meeting starts at 1. Public comment is at 3, and the hearing of endorsed legislation is at 3:30.
Did everybody hear that? Okay, great, thanks.
I guess the other question I have is that particular police departments that are causing this, or is it just scattered?
Well, I mean, we get a lot, because Albuquerque's just larger than most cities in New Mexico. We get a lot from Albuquerque, but we've seen it from a couple of different places around the state. So,
Thank you.
Okay.
I have a question.
Thank you.
Actually, sorry, Kenny, maybe you know, is what has been done in the past is there to educate or to make a bridge the gap or with law enforcement? So just a memo that goes out that they know, you know, how about the program and how it works and who to call, or is that something that maybe there's just a lack of education amongst all departments, do you think?
I think there's probably a combination, to be honest. So there's some information on our website. You know, sometimes those calls at 3 o'clock in the morning, they'll say, hey, we were looking at your website, but X wasn't clear, and we got the number from there to try to clarify this.
At 3 in the morning?
At 3 in the morning. Like I said, sometimes it's very busy, sometimes it's not. I think through those phone calls, what we're trying to do is let folks know that we can go out and do some education for officers, and we've been doing that. I'm not sure how many law enforcement, might not have been a lot this year.
I've done a few, and I have a request for one more.
So we try to route them over to Jenna to say, hey, there's this opportunity for your officers to learn more, and I think those conversations are beneficial.
What about a statewide memo where they don't have to come to the website that gets sent out to every department across the state?
Yeah, we could think of doing that. We have a listserv that we could probably get our law enforcement fact sheet updated and out to them. So Andrew, will you write that down as an action item for the program? And we can provide you guys an update at the next meeting on where we're at with that. I think that's a great idea.
Hey Kenny, one more thing. Is cannabis tested for in a traffic stop where there is possession?
Not that I'm aware of.
So in regards to what you asked about, Dr. Wu,
can I get your name, please?
Regarding...
what's your name, sir?
I'm sorry, my name is Alex Jones.
Thanks.
Regarding coordinating information between patients and results, what you were talking about through BioTrack, there's actually no portal within BioTrack to actually enter the patient's reason for having their cannabis card, the medical cannabis card to begin with. So that's a great idea, but there's no mechanism through BioTrack for that, just to clarify that information.
yes.
Both my wife and I have worked with BioTrack extensively, entering patients in the dispensary atmosphere here in New Mexico for the former Mother Earth Herbs in Albuquerque.
Thank you.
Go ahead, ladies.
Kenny, I just want to clarify that it may not show up on the producer side, but the department itself does actually track conditions by registering each patient.
When we are entering the patient's information to register them with a dispensary, and that you know, we can coordinate what products they buy, but not in correlation to their condition.
Jolie Kleinhans. I just want to know, does the Department of Health and the Cannabis Advisory Board, do you guys endorse the program, or do you just enforce rules? Because I think that if you guys would give more of an endorsement on it out to the public, to the police, to all of that, that says, hey, you know what, they're patients, this is okay, this is legal in our state, and the police officers as well as the general public get that information, they wouldn't be treated so much like criminals when they get stopped by the police officers. And I know that there's other programs that the Department of Health does endorse to get the word out. So why is this one, if it's not, because I haven't seen it, why is this one not endorsed in the same way? Because instead, it's just a regulation and we are just vilified as patients, and we get stopped, we get harassed, we get looked down upon by the public because we don't have an endorsement. We just have a rule that says we can.
I'd like to say something about that. Thank you very much for that comment. As an addiction medicine physician, this raises the issue of stigma, right?
Yes.
Which is something that is a huge problem. And so I think your point is excellent. And I would like to see, given Rachel's idea of some sort of statement that would be issued to law enforcement throughout the state that would include some background information about this program. It's been around for a long time. This is legal. This is a New Mexico statute. Here it is. You know, and so provide some education to try to address this issue, to try to break down some of the stigma. Thank you very much for your comment.
I think with that said, to Mr. Love, your comment about HIPAA, I think that I would have to say that does sound a little, perhaps it would be walking the line to have law enforcement be able to enter in a patient's name and check. I mean, that could be...
especially for PPLs, too.
Right. I mean, we have HIPAA in the medical field everywhere, and there's still constantly trying, issues of people walking by a computer, opening someone's chart, and being able to just type in a family member or a friend, or seeing if they're listed in the database, and who knows, that sounds like a slippery slope to me. I know it's hard for you all to be on call with it, but it might, I think that there's a lot maybe that would have to be worked around to endorse that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you reveal the condition as well?
No. My name is Joseph Gonzalez. I'm a patient, and on July 2nd of this year, earlier, I was actually T-boned by a tow truck, and it was about 3 doors down from my house. I was just moving my car, so I walked to my house to get my phone. So I'm leaving the scene of an accident. The officer comes back. I have red eyes. I tell him I have my card. I'm a 100% service-connected disabled veteran that I need to take the alternative tests because I can't keep balance and stuff like that. Well, long story short, I spend the night in jail and never given the opportunity for a breathalyzer, never taken to the hospital as I requested to submit to any kind of a test. So this isn't just a rumor, it goes on. And instead of playing catch up, no disrespect, I think your idea is good, putting out a memo and getting law enforcement trained up and on the same page and saying this is where we're at. But the police academy's right down the street. They need to start the officers from when they're getting indoctrinated into the whole thing, so they get used to the idea, because this is reality.
That's a great idea.
I'm sorry, sir, can I get your name again? I missed that.
Joseph Gonzalez.
Thank you.
If I may respond to that, thank you for your comments. Very, very, very important for us all to hear as we move forward with this important issue. I actually am involved with a program called LEAD, which some of you may be familiar with, Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion, based on a very successful program started in Seattle. Santa Fe is the second city in the United States to have this program. And the police training issue that you raise is exactly one that we are facing and working with here, so that officers receive this education as part of their training, that this program exists. And again, this is all part of, as I see it, a part of breaking down the stigma around these issues that's unfortunately alive and well in our communities. So I think medical cannabis program information, as well as LEAD and other sorts of programs similar to this, need to be part of the education and training of law enforcement. Thank you.
My name is Matt Vogel. I'm a registered nurse and a nurse practitioner student. And I'm thanking you very much for bringing up stigma. It's a huge issue for the patients that I deal with. They're very fearful of what providers are going to think of them. But also, providers are patients too. I know providers that use. I know providers that are fearful of their licenses because they use, and this is the best option for them. And so it's so important to remove that stigma, and I applaud you for bringing that up. Thank you very much.
Ginger again. Laura, I just wanted to let you guys know, and I don't know what the Department of Health or you as the board could do, but I think it's important that we do. We had a member reach out to us. She was a nursing student in her last year, and they kicked her out of the nursing program for being a patient, for being a sick person. for the choice of medicine.
Kicked out of what university? Do you mind me mentioning?
Haas.
Okay.
Southwest.
Yeah, and so, I mean, that is so counterintuitive and counterproductive and just ridiculous.
Has she or he reached out to any advocacy groups?
She reached out to us and we put her in contact with an attorney.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, she went to the board and they said, we don't care, we have federal funding, we're going to lose our federal funding because somehow they're just going to, have to report themselves when, I've dealt with schools for years with children with special needs and they never report themselves when they violate other rules, but these rules they just have to, So, the reasoning is ridiculous and I don't know if it's insurance they're worried about. I don't know what they're worried. I mean, I'm sure that plays a huge part, but something has got to be worked out because, she was in her last year and going to go out and be beneficial to the world and everything else. And because she's a sick person, she can't go into her career. She can't.
Mm-hmm. This is obviously evidence of ongoing federal-state conflict around medical cannabis, as we all know.
I just wanted, this is Nat Dean, medical cannabis patient and advocate. Albuquerque has just announced a couple weeks ago that they're going to start the LEAD program in Albuquerque also.
Mm-hmm. I know.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
I appreciate everybody's comments, and I really appreciate the patience of the medical cannabis program staff. Kenny being open to having more of a dialogue. We have a smaller group today. We have a agenda on the smaller side, so it's a wonderful opportunity for us to have more of a dialogue than an actual more formal meeting as we tend to do. So thank you all. I appreciate everybody's patience and participation today.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm going to ask a question then. Can you hear me? I don't hear your microphone. My name is Dr. Valerie Gremion. I have a PhD in neuroscience. And my first concern is that. So for the last legislative session that we tried to get extend the medical cannabis protocol to opioids, for instance, I was the legislative advisor. Because simply I can explain the reward system, cannabis, opioids, all that kind of stuff. So first I would like to voice my concern about, I'm not clear from the news whether or not the board is fully constituted. This is only 6 of the. Do we have all? We
have a quorum. We have 3 or more, and we're robust at 6. This is the best we've been in years.
Right.
Let me tell you. And so we are definitely quorum. We're definitely legit.
I cheer that. It's more that I am wondering whether or not this group, given that we have a new governor and that we will hopefully be making other changes, are open to a greater dialogue around the constituency of how things are working. My greatest concern is I am seeing 0 education material out there, like out to the schools, out to the teens, out to the older people, out to anyone about how to use any of these things. I'm hearing everything from the dispensaries. I've sat down with heads of multiple dispensaries here and in Colorado, and I can tell you not a damn one of them knows anything about how this system is working, and that is what has me very concerned, because they're literally making direct statements like, this is for pain and this is for that, and I'm like, no, wrong, not even true, certainly not documented. So I'm concerned about a couple things, and I know you're going to interrupt me, so I'll sit down in 1 second. But I'm concerned about we could make an effort to bring science much more into this through both UNM, of course, but many other places around the state, and we aren't getting, in order to address the stigma, people need to understand this system, this is our oldest neurochemical system. This is governing most of a ton of our brain chemistry, and there's a reason why no one dies from it. And some of these pieces of material are not getting to our state legislators at all. And before teenagers, I would almost say, could you guys please request and advise the legislators to organize a meeting, even a weekend or a 2 to 4 hour thing, I'll teach it, someone should teach it, but I'm afraid to say that our legislators know far too insufficient information to be able to make any real decisions on this. And so I would ask that we set up some kind of a structured education program, and we could become the leaders on this. We have the right, so we could become leaders in this. So while I applaud everything you're doing, I'm firmly requesting a couple of these things.
Thank you. Okay, my turn. So I'm Dr. Laura Brown. I've been on this Medical Cannabis Advisory Board for almost 6 years now. We've actually voted twice to have opioid use disorder added to the list of medical qualifying conditions for the state of New Mexico's medical cannabis program medical qualifying conditions list. I'd like to point out the amazing work of Dr. Leah Roberts and Ms. Jenna Burt in the back as far as providing health education to providers and community groups all over the state. They've been tireless in their efforts, and so I don't know if you're aware of what they've been doing. I'd also like to point out, I think this is a great segue of what I wanted to add to the agenda today. This is the Senate Memorial 105 Task Force recommendations. I see many people I know in this room who've been involved with this, and so the legislature is actually aware of medical cannabis thanks to the work of the task force which started this summer. This report was just issued last month, actually 2 months ago now, October of 2018, and it's been heard in a couple of legislative venues, definitely towards the upcoming 60-day legislative session, which will be probably a very, very, very interesting, exciting, and busy time, given that we have a new governor coming on board. And so if you're not aware of this, I urge you to get a copy of this. This is the bound copy.
How do we get a copy?
Drug Policy Alliance, but it's also posted on the Drug Policy Alliance website. Okay, they're just down the road from here in Santa Fe.
It's also posted on the New Mexico Legislature website under the Legislative Health and Human Services meeting in, what's the date on that, Kelly?
This one is October 2018, and what this was a memorial, a legislative memorial to establish a task force that was done from last year, asking, it was Jerry Ortiz-Pino, asking for recommendations to improve accessibility and affordability of medical cannabis for all New Mexicans. So here's the task force recommendations. There was a lot of work that went into this document. So,
and the hearing this afternoon is these people presenting to the committee.
Thank you for that, Sarah. So, with that,
Ginger Grider. I'm from the New Mexico Medical Cannabis Patients Advocates Alliance, and I just met with Jen in the back. We just talked, and we're working. Are you aware of the Cannabis Nurses Association?
No.
Here in Mexico. Okay, well, there's a Cannabis Nurses Association. Unfortunately, we don't have a Physicians Cannabis Association. It's just the Nurses Association. Yet we don't have one. But the Cannabis Nurses Association is very active in the state. They have several nurses. Jen and I are going to get together with them and the Advocacy Alliance, and we're going to she's going to do a training of trainers, and then through the Alliance we're going to send the nurses out to the doctors and nurses in the community to go, kind of like pharmaceutical reps do, go and say, this is the program, this is what it is, this is how you do your, and so that's in the works of getting them more trained. Being able to give information like, Girl Scout cookie is good for pain. No one can really do that. I mean, that's,
I know.
because one, the person who's selling it doesn't know that that's exactly what it is, and two, it's just kind of, also with cannabis, it's kind of a strain specific or patient.
You don't know.
You don't know. You don't know what you're getting. You don't know what it's doing. You don't know. So, I mean, that kind of information really isn't, but the Cannabis Nurses Association does have good on general dosing, and they have lots of good educational information on alternative ways, explaining topicals, explaining edibles versus vaping, just the different ingestion methods and things like that. So, I mean, that is in the works.
So if I might add just one comment to that. I'm going to start a cannabis blog for this reason, from the neuroscience perspective. But for the past 3 days, I've been looking up everything I can, and I just want to point this out, and it's, I'm a firm advocate of the use of cannabis, but what I am seeing, and I didn't catch your name? Ginger, I'm sorry. The problem is that people think that they're explaining something, and frankly, nothing has been explained.
Right.
I'm not, I would like to know, and this is, again, nothing personal, but I'm getting a bit upset about this, because I see a ton of people who know nothing really about any of this, how the endocannabinoid system, how it intersects with anything else, dose response curve, anything. I'm seeing tons of people speaking about this, talking about this, giving out this information. I have tons of people telling me things that are all completely wrong. And frankly, I think this is the kind of thing that could take down the medical cannabis program, because at some point we're going to hit someone who dies because of a weird condition, and this information will not have been out there. And so I'm just going to, it's going to sound confrontational, so I apologize for that. But I would request that you guys please propose that you have a neurochemist, a neuropharmacologist, someone who specializes in brain chemistry on the board, number one. They could be a private citizen, who cares, but someone who can literally read all the literature and actually extract out the critical things. And I understand as doctors, you have to some degree some of that training, but certainly not the time, or that's not your focus and center. Do you know what I mean? It's not, you weren't.
It's actually our job to review the petitions and to be pretty well versed on medical cannabis, all the things that you listed. Right. So, and we are very grateful to have the expertise, board certified expertise of all of us on the board, including a neurologist, thank goodness, right?
Yeah. So is there a neurochemist or a neuropharmacologist?
It's not specified in statute.
No, I understand that.
Right.
That's why I'm asking you to do this, because
we need statutory change in order to achieve that.
Here's my issue, is I have spoken to so many people, 1,000 people, from legislators to everybody, and people think that they know. And I'm talking about my own doctors, and many doctors I've spoken to. They are coming to me for information. They are asking me, and what I have understood, because my training was with medical students for 6 years, and then neuroscience as well. So I'm sorry to say this, but I don't think any of you guys are well trained enough in the brain of what will happen there, and the things I'm seeing that are being said are false. From the neuroscience literature, I can prove it that it's false. And I don't want this to become something that I'm writing articles about or attacking anyone. I'm saying, can we get straight on this, please? Because even the doctors, I'm setting up to teach doctors about this, because they don't, CB1, CB2, all the other receptors that are being born right now, and the other side effects.
I think most of us have a pretty good knowledge of that.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
All right. So
but thank you for your comments.
The relation between the reward system and opiates and cannabis?
I treat patients with opioid use disorder.
Right.
So I teach on these very topics.
Okay.
Yeah. So thanks.
Just to comment on what you're saying, I appreciate your comments. I think that the education of doctors out there who are going to certify patients is extremely important. We've talked about this. Dr. Leah Roberts is also on board with this and helping out with this. I think that there's a disconnect from my understanding, is that there's a little disconnect as to what our role as the board is. And so I don't think, we just found out, we had a meeting set up. I think our new board is really motivated and excited to discuss this, have a journal club. This is what we do and what we're used to doing. And we're unfortunately not allowed to meet outside of this meeting, because we can't have discussions and make decisions that are not able to be, that are public, so that you all are privy to what we're thinking and what we're deciding. So I think that, while I think your suggestions are excellent, I think that the role of the board actually is not going to fulfill what you're asking. So your idea, we have a nursing alliance, maybe a doctor's alliance, to put together physicians to educate. I've talked to Dr. Roberts, we've mentioned the idea of bringing in, doing lectures, doing a grand rounds at Christus at the hospital, do grand rounds to educate physicians that are certifying patients. So I think what you're saying and your ideas are great. I do think that a lot of doctors in these days are very specialized, and so not every single doctor is going to be completely well-versed in what they're doing, and those doctors that are not well-versed might not be the ones certifying patients. So it is something that doctors take interest in, and then are the ones that are going to attract the patients that need to come in. So I think your ideas are excellent, but I don't think that that the role of our board is we can't become lobbyists as in this position, unfortunately. So it might take another task force, and it might take that. But our role is to learn, like Dr. Brown said, is to learn about the science of it. I think there's a ton of science, and I think by the time it trickles down, we're making scientific decisions and recommendations and using exactly what you're saying. By the time it trickles down to be on the list of approved conditions, someone who might be approved for pain might not know the exact reasons behind it, but this is where it's starting.
Right. Our job is to make recommendations to the Medical Cannabis Program and the Secretary of Health. That's our sole role as volunteers. So, I mean, it might be interesting to consider other roles, but that is our role in statute.
Right, and I would welcome an expanded role for each one of us in this. I have taken the medical cannabis concept to the administration of Christus, and it's like, no, we'll just keep it with the primary cares and whichever other physicians want to certify. So I run the pain program. I have extensive seminar knowledge, and I have this discussion with many of my patients, especially the higher the opioid use, the more I want to do this. So I know every one of you is doing the same thing. But there's a disconnect between the board here, its role by statute, and the legislature. So I welcome this knowledge, and I would like even better communication to say, okay, I wasn't familiar with this task force until recently.
I think also you're really speaking to this huge issue of an understanding quite clearly that we don't have sufficient knowledge as a whole, not just ourselves, but the scientific community doesn't have sufficient knowledge. We don't have sufficient research, and that's going to continue to be a significant problem, particularly with physicians who are sort of addicted, if you will, to double-blind, placebo-controlled studies. And that's going to be a sort of FDA and federal problem, and until that problem with the feds is resolved, I think that's going to be a very difficult thing to sort this stuff out.
Can we go?
Go ahead.
All right, my name is Emily Filomena, and there is plenty of information out there. The National Academy of Science put out a really great paper in 2017. I suggest you look that up. That's got incredible information in there. I also want to address, like, as a patient, how do we know that the medicine is actually safe, not riddled with pesticides? You know, are there regulations for that? Because as a patient myself, I've consumed some stuff that I'm like, wow, this is definitely has either fertilizers or something that's not natural. I could tell. Yeah, heavy metals, pesticides, carcinogenic boosters that are put onto the plants to make sure that they're, you know, bigger buds and stuff like that. I think as patients we deserve to know exactly what is in the, you know, how it's being grown, or we need to have a community of people that will grow safe medicine for our patients, for the New Mexico patient community, so that we know we're not damaging ourselves trying to help ourselves, because it's a big issue, you know?
Thanks for raising those issues. As I had mentioned briefly earlier, unfortunately, we had hoped to have the previous environmental scientist for the medical cannabis program present today. He was actually on the agenda, and unfortunately that's not possible. So I would like to have us consider putting it on the agenda for the next meeting. Very, 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 very important issue. Thank you.
Go ahead. My name is Dr. Vinlo Presti. I'm a cell and molecular biologist. And I'd like to agree with Emily. There's a whole lot of information, but you've got to have the time to go access it. There's a lot of research being done in Israel.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Both clinical research and basic research. The problem is, again, you have to be dedicated to that end of it. None of you people have the time to do that kind of dedication, which is why I agree that what we need is a separate entity of educational people, mostly biologists and chemists and neurochemists, to develop some materials, and appropriate materials. I come at this from two angles. I'm a 14-month recovered opiate addict. And without cannabis, I could have never done it. Mm-hmm. And the reason I had to wait to take cannabis is that I was on opiates for 12 years working for Los Alamos and Sandia. They gave me security clearance. Cognitive problems don't drive on these things, no problem, you can work for us. Obviously, because I had brain injury and I had a headache that I could not think through, and the opiates allowed me to become functional. So I chose to be on opiates. I'm not blaming anybody. But in the same way, without opiates now, I can choose to be on cannabis, and it clarifies the same way opiates clarified my cognition, so does cannabis by ameliorating a headache that I have no other way to deal with. And so my point here is that we have to go on a patient-by-patient basis for whether these substances are impairing or actually enhancing someone's function, particularly if we're referring to a non-psychoactive one like CBD. Mm-hmm. And I'm afraid about mass class discrimination against people that take these things. Employment discrimination is what I'm talking about. I don't know how we're going to get to the point of doing it on a case-by-case basis, but I think ultimately that's what we need to aim at.
Thank you so much for your comments. A couple things to respond. It's a little late in the game for those of you who are interested in these sorts of changes that would involve a statutory change, right? The 60-day legislative session is right around the corner. It starts January 15th of next month. But there's no harm if you're interested in contacting your legislators about these issues, because, as I said, with a new governor and presumably a new Secretary of Health, don't know about that yet, but there's a chance that there's opportunities for us to expand the role of the medical cannabis program. Also related to staffing, Dr. Leah Roberts could have more time to work with some of these issues, right? If there was adequate staffing in the medical cannabis program office where they're working overtime just in order to process applications legally and expeditiously, as they continue to do beautifully. So, like I said, contact your legislatures, because we are lucky here in New Mexico. We have a very rich tradition of harm reduction and public health and medical cannabis that has led the nation for a long time. And so I think we have an incredible opportunity coming up to address these issues. Thank you.
So you're saying I'd be better off writing letters to Senator Ortiz and Pino rather than to the Department of Health?
I'm not going to say that one's more effective than the other, but I mean, things that require statutory change, yes, that has to go through your legislator. And most of you in the room know the legislators that are particularly cannabis friendly, to be honest, medical cannabis friendly. So, and if you don't, ask around. But yeah, there's definitely a long history of medical cannabis legislative advocates here in New Mexico who would be very interested in hearing the story that you just presented. Thank you.
Please get in contact with there's the Patients Advocate Alliance that my husband and I are board members of, and then Gina is right there. Gina she is the Cannabis Nurses Association, and we're going to be working with education, and then I think, Lauren, do you know if the Department of Health in contact with families as faculty through UNM? I know I used to do that with Pro, and I know that they do the medical side as well. Maybe we could get the cannabis program introduced through that.
I'm sorry, say that again.
What program? The Families as Faculties program through UNM.
I'm not familiar with
education.
that.
Well, with parents reaching out, what we did for special needs children is anyone who was going to medical school, getting ready to start, well, it wasn't medical school, it was education. I work on the education side. And so anyone that was going into teaching would attend a class, and they would, for the semester, their assignment was just to go and visit a special needs family in their home and listen to their story. And then they had to write a paper, and and then we would come in at the end of the semester and we would present at the beginning and at the end, and you'd see this huge change, because most people were like, I don't have anything to do with special needs, I'm not going to go into SPED, I don't care about SPED. And then by the end of the semester, everybody's like, oh, I'm going to go into special ed, and it just helped to introduce them to that world. Well, they do it here in Albuquerque at UNM on the medical side, and they do it with medically fragile and different things. And so maybe we could work with maybe the Department of Health could work with families as faculty and help to introduce, and then the physicians to be who are getting ready to graduate could spend some time.
But I go back and then we need to move on with our agenda because we do have 3 or 4 petitions to consider today. But again, I go back to the staffing level of the medical cannabis program. There are incredible, dedicated professionals in the medical cannabis program office who are drowning in some ways happily in new patient enrollment applications. If there was proper staffing, they would be able to spend professional time to improve their advocacy efforts and education efforts around the state. So
we'll see how we can.
Yeah. Okay. May we move on with the agenda now, or any other burning issues for the moment? If not, please make sure you signed up for the public comment period after we finish hearing the petitions.
I just have one little question.
Mm-hmm. What's your name? I'm sorry.
My name's Christina Gasca.
Yeah, thanks.
I was just wondering if they drug test for these positions. I mean, it is with the medical cannabis program. Do they drug test the people who apply?
I'm looking to you guys. I don't know.
We do not.
Cool. Thank you.
Right. Okay. So, without further ado, going back to our agenda. So we have 4 petitions from the public to mention and also to discuss. The first one actually is an interesting segue for us to consider that was submitted was petition 2018-003, which is to add a pharmacist as a voting member of the Medical Cannabis Advisory Board. And the comment that was brought to my attention with the agenda draft was that this could not be heard as this requires a statutory change. Well, I actually read the petition, as I always do, and I actually think it raises an interesting issue, and I'm looking at Chris Woodward about this. The Lynn and Aaron Compassionate Use Act actually specifies practitioners. And so I don't know if at any time in the medical cannabis program and Medical Cannabis Advisory Board history whether this has been brought up, but there are obviously different definitions of practitioners. I mean, there's healthcare practitioners, but that could include a nurse practitioner. It could also include a clinician pharmacist. It could include anybody with prescribing authority here in New Mexico. So in that way, as I saw it, it seems as if there is a possible opportunity without a statutory change in order to include other types of healthcare practitioners on this Medical Cannabis Advisory Board besides physicians. So I just wanted, I don't know if you have a comment about that, Chris. Yeah.
So I think that's correct. Practitioner is defined pretty broadly.
Yes.
I think the tricky issue here is in section 26(2)(b)(6), which requires that the 8 practitioners represent these certain particular fields and that they be nationally board certified in them. And there isn't anything about pharmacology in there. And so if there's, I suppose if someone is a pharmacist and they meet the definition of a practitioner, and they can prescribe medications, and if they are nationally board certified in any of those enumerated areas of specialty, then I think they probably could be on the board. It's just, I think we're guessing that if somebody is a pharmacist, they're not nationally board certified in those enumerated areas.
Right, and I actually pulled aside for people, thank you so much, Chris, for that clarification. The relevant excerpt from the Lynn and Aaron Compassionate Use Act that we are talking about in this part is the definition of Section 3. A practitioner means a person licensed in New Mexico to prescribe and administer drugs that are subject to the Controlled Substances Act, as I was indirectly referring to just a few minutes ago. Section 6, Advisory Board created, duties, among others. The Secretary of Health shall establish an advisory board consisting of 8 practitioners representing the fields of neurology, pain management, medical oncology, psychiatry, infectious disease, family medicine, and gynecology. The practitioners shall be nationally board certified in their area of specialty and knowledge about the medical use of cannabis. The members shall be chosen for appointment by the Secretary from a list proposed by the New Mexico Medical Society. As I said, so I do think there is some room for discussion about this going forward. And I think certainly there's interest. I know in the past, several years ago, there was interest in, as long as somebody was board certified, could they still be retired? Could they be retired? Could they be a retired practitioner? That would also potentially help with ensuring adequate staffing of the Medical Cannabis Advisory Board. Any thoughts, comments, ideas before we move on?
I think you'll have a problem with that because if you're retired, chances that you're going to maintain your DEA license pretty low because it's very expensive.
True. Although the New Mexico controlled substance license is actually very economical.
Right.
So.
Can nurse practitioners prescribe?
Absolutely. Yeah. As can physician assistants, who are also certified.
But I guess it gets down to the word of board certified, and whether it's a board or some other
medical board versus a nursing board.
Or, yeah.
I have a perspective because in my first life as a professor, I taught pharmacy students. And when I need to discuss pharmacology, I don't call my physician, I call one of my ex-students. At this point, they're all in 6-year degrees, earning Doctor of Pharmacy in the PharmD program. In that last clinical year, they tend to specialize in an area, and many specialize in pharmacology/immunology. So I'm sure you can find pharmacists around that have they are obviously board certified by the Board of Pharmacy, and I'm sure you can find one that essentially has expertise in pharmacology enough to basically be on a board like this.
They cannot prescribe.
I'm Jean-Paul Dam. So in the state of New Mexico, there is actually a clinical pharmacist program.
Right.
And so I think it's additional training that a general pharmacist has to go through, after which time they can prescribe medications. And I believe I would assume there's some sort of board there. So I think if you could find a pharmacist who was a clinical pharmacist or had that training, they would certainly meet the requirements of the board.
I believe you're talking about an internship beyond the PharmD.
Yeah, it's an additional, I think, 300 patient hours underneath the physician. I trained a pharmacist once in that.
But in terms of addressing the statutory change aspect of some of this language, which I think would probably be required in order to broaden it in a way that you all might be most interested in, I did want to make sure that everybody, one of the recommendations from the task force report that I mentioned earlier, number 10 says create a patient and caregiver advisory board and support physician. And so that it is envisioned could be a parallel board in connection with and in communication and collaboration with the Medical Cannabis Advisory Board.
I have a question.
What's your name, for the record?
Oh, Sarah Dole. Yeah. I have a question for Chris. Chris, is there anything in the statute that actually prevents them from adding someone to the board if they want to?
Well, so the statute specifies how many people are on the board and what areas of specialty they have to come from. The Secretary of the Department of Health adds members to the board, but if the statute doesn't commit, like if the individual doesn't sort of fit within the classifications that are in the statute, she can't add them to the board. So I think the thought is that if there was a change to either the definition of practitioner and or the categories, the areas of specialty that the board members have to come from, in the statute, then the secretary would be able to add a pharmacist or someone else.
But there would be nothing to prevent them from adding a consultant to the board, maybe a non-voting member that was a pharmacist.
Oh boy. I don't know. I mean, I tend to think the statute says the board consists of X number of members and they have to come from this background.
Okay.
And so, I mean, I think certainly if they, if a pharmacist wanted to come here and talk to them and give their perspective on things, I think that would be fine. It's just designating them as a member. Yeah.
Thank you. So I think I need to get back to my script. So, procedural matters. Okay, back to petition review. Got it? Okay, here we go. We will proceed with the hearing by considering each petition. Applicants have been informed in advance that their petition would be heard today. The petitions have been redacted to protect the confidentiality of the applicant. However, applicants were informed that they may speak directly to the board, the Medical Cannabis Advisory Board, if they request to do so in advance. In the event that any applicant has made such a request, the board may go into executive session to hear the individual applicant. Only those confidential issues related to the applicant's health status may be discussed in a closed meeting. If we do go into a closed executive session, I will ask that any person who is recording this hearing using any form of recording device, please take that device with them when they leave the room. I remind those giving testimony today that this hearing is being recorded. Before you speak, please state for the record your full name and whom you represent. After each witness has testified, I will permit the members of the board to question the witness. Any witness who wishes to submit evidence with their testimony may do so when they are recognized to testify. At that time, those exhibits will be numbered and entered in the record. The board will begin by accepting statements from petitioner applicants only, which again may take place in the closed executive session, followed by those persons who applied to submit technical evidence related to the petitions presented. The board will accept comments from members of the public later in the meeting after the hearing of the petition. Public comments should concern the petition that's pending or the condition that is being applied for. When we get to the public comment stage, we will ask that you please limit your comments to 2 minutes so that we have time for everyone to offer their comments. So with that, let us move on to the next petition that we have on our agenda, which is petition 2017-039, which is a petition to add degenerative neurological disorder and neuroprotective as approved conditions. As you all probably know, given that it starts with 2017, this was previously heard last year and was tabled for further consideration, so it has come back up to be discussed today. Do we have the petitioner actually here today? Anybody know?
We didn't have any, the petitioner did not contact us.
Okay, so I guess then I'm going to open up to my fellow board members for discussion about this particular petition. I will comment up front, logistically, it was 36 pages long. We have talked about that at several recent meetings about our preference, quite frankly, for streamlined petitions with actual hard copy references included. So just to mention that. I can start with some comments unless you guys want to about this particular petition. You sure? Okay. I'm talking too much, you guys. Okay. So one thing I noticed, basically, in terms of neurodegenerative conditions, the conditions that were included in this included Alzheimer's, ALS, Friedreich's ataxia, Huntington's disease, Lewy body disease, Parkinson's disease, and spinal muscular atrophy. To my way of reading this, 4 of these 7 conditions are already medical qualifying conditions. And so I think that's notable in terms of considering adding this. Any other thoughts at this point? We also have a related kind of subset petition by a different petitioner to add Alzheimer's disease to the list of medical qualifying conditions, which we're going to discuss next.
I think degenerative neurological disorders is an incredibly wide category. And as Dr. Browder said, already we have 4 of the conditions involved. At some level, I would almost suggest that someone come back with the idea of degenerative neurological disorder with examples such as dementia, Alzheimer's, and other types, and ALS and Huntington's and so forth, so that you have one condition that's a broad definition, takes care of a lot of different issues, and saves people from having to apply for different subsets of conditions. Because I mean, you're going to get into the question of, you know, what do you do for people who have things such as cerebellar degenerations or have multi-system atrophies and so on. I mean, there's thousands of these conditions. I don't think we should be sitting to just do each one by one as they really come up.
So how would that, Emily Filomena, how would that happen? Do we need to petition again for those, like an umbrella term, basically?
One way to address this also, which has been discussed in relation to the task force report, is to have New Mexico medical cannabis program adopt, as it is in other states, physician or healthcare practitioner discretion. Any medical condition for which the medical practitioner who thinks that the patient may benefit from medical cannabis can be added. So that would be a broader umbrella way of approaching this. And several states, including the District of Columbia, currently have this provision in their medical cannabis programs. So that would be one way to provide that broader umbrella term that would include all kinds of neurodegenerative disorders, not just the 7 that I listed.
I think the other question that I have here is the neuroprotective issue. Neuroprotection is a so far largely failed mission for which there is very little evidence for just about anything. And I think that it would be very difficult to support the neuroprotective aspect given the evidence that's available.
I was curious with your.
I'm sorry. What is your name, sir?
I'm Matt Fogel again.
Thank you.
I was curious with your categories. You said that the neurodegenerative or disease category is too broad. We have disease states like cancer. How many different variations of that are there? Chronic pain is the most vague thing that you could possibly have. But we're going to split hairs over, like you said, something that has 4 different conditions already on there, and a lot of different things can fall under this, and we already have shown benefit for these disease states with cannabis.
So I mean, what I was trying to say, and I guess I misspoke, or was misunderstood, is that I think, we should have a broad category, and because we've already got those conditions, and what I was trying to say is I don't think it's appropriate to be coming back here for every rare neurodegenerative condition time after time, because there's going to be one person in the state that has multi-system atrophy that wants this, and they're going to have to come here. And then there's going to be somebody else who has frontotemporal dementia is going to have to come back here. And then there's going to be somebody else who has a vascular dementia has to come back. I mean, I think that's a form of...
And we'll stop wasting your time by
everybody's
time. Broadening those categories. Thank you.
Other comments, you guys? Does everyone want to make a motion? Yeah, do you want to make a motion?
I just have a question, because I was going to speak to what you did, about the other states or DC having the option of any condition that is considered appropriate by recommending physician. What would it take to have that, you think, on that?
It could be done, I guess it could be done as a petition. Could it be done as a petition for that specific situation? Like somebody could bring a petition that says, any medical condition deemed by the healthcare practitioner to that cannabis might benefit could do that? I mean, rather than a specific disease condition? I mean, so could somebody like you all bring a petition to us and we would vote on it? Yes. Or another way, obviously, as it's reflected in the task force report, is that it could be legislated, right? Which is
nullify our board.
Well, I'm not saying it would nullify our board, but so anyway, I see it possible either of those two ways. Do you guys have any thoughts about that?
I think somebody could petition for something that broad. It's just a question of whether the secretary would agree to it.
Right. So I would urge you all to consider doing that.
We will do that.
So, and certainly we haven't talked about the date of our next meeting. Hopefully, if things are back on track now that we have a wonderful quorum here, we probably will be going back to meeting in April and November of next year, as we have historically, and the April meeting would certainly fall after the legislative session, so things could be updated based on what happens in the legislative session this year. But in the meantime, if anybody has any spare time and would like to consider a petition for the next Medical Cannabis Advisory Board public hearing, that would be great.
question about protocol of when these petitions are presented. What is the protocol for when a petition is presented? Is there then a literature review and a compilation of publications, and someone writes up an analytic, report on why this will work or not, and is that available to us? Because that's what I would expect, but I would like to know what the protocol actually is.
Andrea, do you want to start, or Kenny?
So petitions could be submitted at any time, and then they're scheduled for the next advisory board hearing. All the materials we keep an original, we assign a number to it, we then send a redacted copy to all the board members, redacting personal health identifiers of the applicant. Then each board member will review those materials individually, and then at the day of the meeting we'll come in and they'll have a discussion about that actual petition. The person that submitted the petition does have the option of meeting with the advisory board members in executive session to actually discuss their individual issue.
So is it up to the petitioner to present all of the literature that they would like to be considered in that, and there is no effort beyond what they present to assess that?
No, there's 100% effort on our behalf to review the findings and to do our own research.
Okay, good. That's what I mean, she didn't say that, so I didn't. I mean, for review could just be, looks good to me, or versus I'm going to spend 3 days looking at articles, right? So yeah, I'm just putting that. Thank you. But those kinds of then either discussions or the basis of them, the scientific decision-making process there, is that available for public consumption? I mean, is there a report or some basis on which it was...
Once the advisory board, they'll make a recommendation, and then the chair will put together a full report of their recommendations, why they're recommending it, what the specific research is that they're relying on. That would be available to the public, obviously, once it's been submitted to the department.
Thank you so much.
Do we have a motion about this particular petition?
I would like to move a motion that we consider the group degenerative neurologic disorders as an added condition for medical cannabis.
I second that.
Can we, I guess this is a Chris question, can we go for the petition, can we vote on essentially part of the petition? So if we leave off the neuroprotective and just say degenerative neurologic?
Yeah, I would just put it in your motion. So to approve one part and to not approve the other.
So I'll offer another motion that we approve with the degenerative neurological conditions without the neuroprotective aspect.
I think we have to vote on the first motion first.
Oh yes, we did, true.
Yeah. The first one, yeah, I did not include the neuroprotective part. I just said to include degenerative neurologic disorders as a class under the medical cannabis program.
Okay, so we have a motion to add degenerative neurological disorders, but without the neuroprotective aspect of that, and that motion has been seconded. Do we want to vote on that? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Okay, the motion passes 6-0. Okay. So just to be clear, as my colleagues have said, this would be to add degenerative neurological disorders, but not the neuroprotective aspect of this. Okay. So let's go on to the next petition, which is petition 2018-004, add Alzheimer's disease as an approved condition. Now, one could say we've already done that in terms of Alzheimer's is included in the preceding petition that we just heard. I would like us to take some time. Is the petitioner here to present? Okay. Would you like to?
I'm here. I don't know. Do you guys have any questions on it, or? Because it's literally the previous petitioner actually covered everything that I covered in my petition to the 36 pages, like you mentioned.
Yes, I appreciated the brevity of your petition. Thank you very much. I'm serious.
For your petition, for your position, to give you the benefit of the doubt of at least knowing the basics of cannabis and its functions. So.
Yes, thank you. And I would like to add from my previous history, The Medical Cannabis Advisory Board has, I believe, twice already approved the addition of Alzheimer's disease to be added to the list of medical qualifying conditions, and that recommendation has been declined twice by the Secretary of Health. In terms of my notes on this, let me count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 states already list Alzheimer's disease specifically in their list of medical qualifying conditions. So we have adequate national precedent in adding specifically Alzheimer's. And again, I would like to compliment you on your succinct petition, which did include a 2016 medical reference, which I also appreciated. And also including the context of 38,000 New Mexicans currently suffering from Alzheimer's disease, which I appreciated having that background as I considered this petition. Anybody else want to add?
New Mexican, I wanted to bring it for the people who live here.
Thank you.
It affects those of us around, those locals around us.
Thank you. I also liked the way, quite frankly, my petition review of this, that there was a comment how Alzheimer's disease treatment side effects can be devastating as the disease itself. And that's what, as I read it, the spirit of Lynn and Aaron Compassionate Use Act specifies treatment of symptoms of debilitating diseases such as Alzheimer's. So for petition purposes, I would like to make a motion to approve this Alzheimer's disease petition. I mean, it's already included in the previous, so I'm not sure.
I think it's important to do it because in the history of one is declined, perhaps this will be added. So I think it's important based on the history of the decisions or of a recommendation, or based on our recommendations. It's good.
So I'd like to make a motion to add Alzheimer's disease specifically as it's presented in this petition 2018/004 to the list of medical qualifying conditions for medical cannabis in New Mexico. Any seconds?
I'll second.
Second.
All approved? Any opposed? Okay.
I have a question.
The motion passes 6-0.
For the recommendations from this meeting, which secretary will be making the decisions? I guess it depends on timing.
Yes, I think actually, right. We don't know the details. However, I think some of it is the timing of when the Medical Cannabis Advisory Board report is submitted, and the status of who is the Secretary of Health at that time. So I don't think we know yet.
That's an important question because I would like to know if all of you, because we've done, like you said, Alzheimer's a couple of times. We've done autism a couple of times. I think I know, especially with the parents from the autism community, are very frustrated that the board have approved it numerous times, and yet they cannot access the medicine. We have Dr. Jacob UNN looking to do the study on children and cannabis. Cannot find enough with dual diagnosis to satisfy his study, and so I was wondering if the next person's going to be caught up. Like, is there going to be a report to the next Secretary of Health, do you guys know, saying, this one's been done 6 times and the previous inhabitant of your chair?
As chair, when I write the report, I always reference previous status. So yes, that's always included.
Thank you.
Lori, in the past, how soon have the recommendations been submitted after this hearing?
Great question. Some chairs are very quick to write their reports. Others are not. So it depends on the timing. I don't know, Chris, I'm looking to you again. I don't think there's anything in statute that says that the Medical Cannabis Advisory Board report needs to be issued within a specified time frame or deadline after the public hearing. So is that correct? Okay, so there is some flexibility there. Yes.
Just real quick, is the Secretary of Health a doctor?
No, attorney.
Oh, that's nice.
I will say the Secretary of Health is an attorney. Previous Secretaries of Health have I know one that was a nurse. There's no, I don't think in a job description there's any particular.
I'm just wondering, what expertise they're standing on to say no.
Nothing. It's an appointed position.
No, okay, that's what I'm getting at.
It's political.
So they don't have to, they have no medical knowledge at all, they could just not like you guys and just say no.
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay.
Right. Okay. Any other comments before we move on to our final petition for today before public comment? Again, I appreciate everybody's flexibility and collaboration and participation today. This is an enjoyable meeting. All right. So our last petition for today.
We like you too.
What's that?
I said we like you too.
Thank you. Our last petition to consider for today is 2018/002. Adding nystagmus as an approved condition. Does anybody want to start with any comments? Is the petition? First of all, I'm sorry. Is the petitioner here to provide any testimony? Okay. So, any comments or thoughts about this particular petition?
This was the least available research that I could find with any relationship to cannabinoids.
And I went back to the original literature that was quoted, some of which is pretty anecdotal, one or two cases here and there, most of it I think from 20 or 30 years ago. Having said that, I think people with nystagmus are often very nauseated, and that's a very difficult problem to treat. I do think nystagmus is a very broad category again, which makes it easier, I think, to certify people under those circumstances. Many of the patients who have this have things like MS. There are people who have had posterior fossa brain tumors. So there's a lot of things that you could probably get certification for just because of the primary condition that causes the nystagmus. So I don't at all object to this, but I think if the secretary turns it down, then people do have the option of applying under one of the currently allowed conditions.
Would you agree this is a degenerative neurologic disorder?
Not necessarily.
Thank you for those comments. I also wanted to add to that. So, as Dr. Calder has already mentioned, people with nystagmus often have MS or glaucoma, as was mentioned, or nausea and vomiting, chronic nausea and vomiting, and all three of those conditions are already on the medical qualifying condition list, as you've mentioned. I agree that the medical evidence is fairly anecdotal, even though nystagmus, whether it's congenital or acquired, as the petition specified, is clearly a debilitating condition. I do believe that other current medical qualifying conditions could be applied for without specifying nystagmus. So I don't know if others have comments.
Well, as we've said, a lot of the evidence was anecdotal, and what I found too anecdotally was some of the people who were anecdotally expressing their experience with cannabis expressed that it actually made their nystagmus worse. So, I mean, I found it really not very compelling as a diagnosis alone, the use of medical cannabis for the nystagmus. But as the person who gave the petition talked about the strain, the eye strain and the headaches and the neck strain that goes along with it, the headaches. Again, these are symptoms related to the problem, but as far as the problem itself of nystagmus, I couldn't find a whole lot that medical cannabis helped nystagmus.
Do you have a motion?
I have a motion to approve nystagmus as an approved condition.
Any seconds?
And the reason for not seconding the motion is, again, based on the discussions that we've been having, that nystagmus happens as a result of some other underlying condition. And to approve nystagmus by itself, medical cannabis for nystagmus by itself, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I think if there is an underlying condition like MS or some other condition where the patient also has nystagmus, that makes sense. But we don't have enough evidence that nystagmus occurs by itself, and that medical cannabis would definitely benefit in that situation.
I agree, and also just echoing what Dr. Schwartz said, if medical cannabis actually made the nystagmus worse, that doesn't seem to be an appropriate recommendation for us to go forward with adding nystagmus as a medical qualifying condition. So.
Yeah, I agree. That's my reasoning as well, is that, to look at the literature, and based on the literature, and that's based on, I think, our role is to recommend if it is supported in the science. And so maybe more research will be done on it, and then we'll have better evidence to be able to recommend it. That's my reasoning.
I'm not sure you're going to get much more evidence on it. It's also very difficult to do nystagmogram studies and so forth in patients who have nystagmus, congenital or otherwise. And I think, again, it is broad. There's some people say it helps, there's some people say it doesn't. We certainly have plenty of conventional medications that we give for various conditions, which sometimes make people worse. So I wouldn't rule it out on that basis.
Oh, I completely agree with all of that, for sure. So perhaps in the future, if we have a petition about any, you have a specific patient and a petition for any condition that a doctor might think would be, yeah.
I was going to say the same thing. I think that would be the way to go. Would be to have a petition offering a broader umbrella of conditions, any medical condition that a healthcare practitioner believes that medical cannabis will be beneficial. And in this case, if there was nystagmus, then that would fit under that nicely. So I would make a motion at this time not to approve the addition of nystagmus as a medical qualifying condition. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor of the motion to not approve adding nystagmus as a medical qualifying condition? All those in favor of that? Aye? Aye. Opposed? Okay, great. So that particular motion passes by a vote of 5-1 to not recommend the addition of nystagmus to the list of medical qualifying conditions. Okay, so I think that is the 4 petitions that we were asked to review. At this time, it is time for public comment, unless the program has anything else before we move on to the public comment. Has everybody who is interested in providing public comment signed in at the back so Andrea can organize us in that way? Great. Thank you.
Excuse me, I'm going to steal your mic here. Yeah. If you want to okay.
All right, we'll have Nat Dean, and then David Valdez, Monique Chavez. Put a question mark? No? Okay. And so it'll be Nat Dean, David Valdez, and then Matthew Vogel.
Nat, did you need this?
That's for you.
Okay.
That's for the board.
Good morning still. Members of the Medical Advisory Board, members of the audience. My name is Nat Dean. I've been a medical cannabis patient in the program since 2008. Multiple qualifying conditions. I'm a traumatic brain injury survivor from 35 years ago. November was my anniversary month. I deal with chronic pain, unremitting nausea, and a variety of issues. So the handout that you have in front of you, I think at this point, I'm just going to read it. There's a picture at the top of a very large Ziploc baggie filled with a variety of tablets and patches. It says, "This was one of 2 large baggies filled with pills I brought to my local fire station for proper disposal a few years ago. Among 27 medications, the majority of its contents consisted of fentanyl, synthetic morphine, Demerol, Dilaudid, Vicodin, Norco, hydrocodone, codeine, OxyContin, and oxycodone. Just one physician, a specialist trying to treat my chronic pain syndrome, prescribed these medications concurrently. I was only able to leave these behind when my general practice physician suggested that I explore the use of medical cannabis as a tool to treat the chronic pain and the subsequent depression I was enduring. She was right, and I am better off due to her suggestion and her guidance." And then the picture below that is 2 Trader Joe's paper garbage bags filled with empty prescription bottles. So I want to thank all the advocates in the room and thank the panel and thank the Lynn and Aaron Compassionate Use Act, the legislators that have thoughtfully examined this, our role as advocates to continue to try and inform them. Your hard work, and I know you do a lot of research, and there are many organizations that do, for allowing this to be a medicine for me. And as of 2 months ago, I have not taken an OxyContin or oxycodone at all. So.
Thank you, Nat. Thank you for your advocacy.
Hello, how you folks doing? I'd like to say hi to all y'all and I'll welcome all the new board members. Great that you guys are here doing what you guys are doing. I'm just here to use my 2 minutes like I always do to complain about the $50 fee that is being charged to patients that do not receive their cards. For whatever reason they don't receive their cards, they're having to pay a $50 fee to have them replace it. This is about a specific patient who had asked me to talk for her today. Her name is Mary Calver. She allowed me to use her name. She's very, very sick. She's been without her card and her medication for over a month now due to technicalities in the application process. She hasn't got her card, she hasn't used it, and the Department of Health refuses to print out her card unless she pays $50, but she does not have to pay. They're passing the buck basically and saying that it's not their problem, there's not accountability on their half, it's basically our accountability. And so I want to bring that up and just say that it is very, very uncompassionate for any reason to hold a patient's card from them. Sometimes these patients can't go days without their medications because it's really detrimental to them. This patient has been over 6 weeks without her medication, or I think it might even be over than that. And I think that this needs to change immediately. I'm really hoping when the new administration comes in, they're going to see and see how these things are being met and what's going on, and how patients are not being treated fairly, and how they're blatantly being uncompassionate to these patients. And that's basically what I came up here to do. If you guys want to know more, I can talk more. It's going to be a little bit longer than I have here. There's 2 minutes to explain, but I got a lot of documentation, I got video recordings, and I got everything to show you exactly what's going on. And this isn't an isolated incident either. As you know, I've been talking about this for years now, and it has happened over and over and over again, specifically even with a close family member of mine, my mother, who had to pay $50 for a card that was said was mailed to her, that after she paid the $50, they came and said, oh no, we didn't mail it, so we're going to mail it now, but they'd already printed it out, and they wouldn't give her a refund. They said no refunds. So this is not right. This is unethical. It's like extorting money from patients, saying that we're not going to give you your card, you're not going to have your medication unless you pay us $50 for it, regardless if they got their card or not. So it's like, this patient doesn't have her card, she's waiting without it, and she's basically sitting on the sidelines hoping to get $50 to go get her card printed out. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you so much for being a part of this.
Thank you, David. I would want to mention to you, in the Senate Memorial 105 Task Force report, the recommendation number 6 actually seems particularly relevant to what you just told us. It would allow donation of medicine. If a patient, the one that you described, actually does have a card or is in the system but doesn't actually have the card with them, it looks like this could be pertinent. This would establish in statute, the recommendation number 6, establish in statute that transfer, sharing, or gifting of medicine from one licensed patient or caregiver to another is permitted. So
well, that would be great. The only thing is that she doesn't have her card. Would that be illegal now because her card is expired?
well, the question is as I see it.
And not only that, ma'am, I don't want to cut you off, but we wouldn't need any of that if the Department of Health would just print off the cards when they need to, when they should be, when it's obvious that the patient is eligible, her cards are for renewal, and she still hasn't got her card.
Right. So I mean, it.
But
seems,
then I like that. That's really great.
It seems as if that calls into question the power of the card itself. If somebody's already a licensed patient in the system, do they need the card, or would this be able to be allowed?
I love that. It's a great step forward. It's just, what does it do for her now? You know what I mean? And then I'm not disrespect. I really love that. Just that she's hurting, and I mean, she could die tomorrow. I don't know. You know what I mean? And for the Department of Health not to issue this card just because of a technicality or whatever they want to say, I think it's unethical, uncompassionate, and blatantly just wrong. Thank you for your time.
So isn't there another provision in this act that says perhaps cards could not have an or certification could not have an expiration date?
Multi-year certifications? Right. Yeah, that's another thing.
But that's great, so that way we don't have to worry about it.
I'm sorry?
That recommendation is in that report as well. Multi-year.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, David.
I just wanted to thank you guys for your time and for listening to all these proposals. And I really wanted to thank you as medical professionals, like I spoke about earlier with the stigma. There's so much of a stigma in talking about this, even among physicians, in the physicians I've talked to, and they have such a negative review about it. So thank you for being so open-minded and so up on the research. I really appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
Vidlo Prusky.
Thanks for having this meeting. I already said most of what I wanted to say, but I just want to reemphasize one thing. There's not enough information about the damaging effects of opiates out there beyond the addictive piece. There's a subpopulation genetically who's either their mu-opioid receptors in their gut are hypersensitive, or the signal transition systems are genetically hypersensitive, and it destroys your gut. I got off opiates 15 months ago because they were destroying my large intestine. But I could have done this 6 years ago had I been able to work on cannabis. Of course, we have no jurisdiction over the DOE and federal contractors, but I think the state needs to lead the way in trying to shift people from opiates onto cannabinoids, and to be clearer about the destructive effects of opiates beyond simply the addictive potential. And I think the rest of what I said I've already said. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I would point out several states have added opioid use disorder already to their list of medical qualifying conditions for cannabis. New York.
Why we can expect it to be rejected?
I'm sorry? No. Other states.
It will be rejected again.
It will be?
It will be rejected again because the Secretary of Health has not signed off on one thing that this board has recommended since.
That's disappointing.
Yeah.
As I have said at our previous meeting in September, and as we've seen today, it is appropriate to consider repetitioning the Medical Cannabis Advisory Board. Bring those petitions back because I think it could be a different time.
Thank you guys for that. Appreciate it.
Hi, I'm Joe Gonzalez. I'm just a patient. I wanted to thank all you guys for clarifying the issues, what's statutory, and for your volunteerism, putting your necks out there. It's a pretty risky business you guys are all involved in. So, with that said, my thing is I really feel strongly that there should at least be one patient as a board member. And, I can understand now why you guys might be apprehensive about that. would you be open to having a patient on board, maybe not even as a non-voting member individually? No, I understand it's statutory.
I mean, as I mentioned earlier, it is part of the Senate Memorial 105 Task Force report that there would be a parallel kind of patient care caregiver advisory board parallel to this board, and so.
I hadn't read it.
No.
I will.
I'm not expecting you to, but I'm just saying that that indicates my support personally for that.
Okay.
Happy to stick my neck out on that one.
Great.
Yeah.
The other thing that I haven't heard brought up today that I read about online is there's a lot of anxiety amongst the patients. I think a lot of people are anticipating recreational or adult use happening. So there's a lot of nervousness in the community about, is legalization going to happen and we're not going to have any medicine for us. I don't know if there's anything that you can do as a board, or even to go about this, how the two things are going to merge together eventually.
So as I understand the statute, the board is charged with defining the amount of medical cannabis that is necessary and appropriate for a 90-day period, right? There are also, I think, a lot of...
Sorry about your voice.
There is also a lot of controversy whether the health department rules by or legislates by administration, right? So I'm sorry the council isn't here, but I understood there was a challenge to the health department's regulation limiting the number of plants. I don't know where that went.
I think they said it was, I forget the terms, but I think arbitrary. Yeah, so that already went down. So the other thing, that you guys are approaching it from a medical standpoint, which is great, but there's also the reality of the socio-economical side of it. Like I said, I'm 100% veteran, and medical cannabis program has helped me get off my benzodiazepine, and it's helped me greatly reduce my opioid. But straight up, I can't get just off my opioid because CBD is out the roof, and it's just it's expensive. So I don't know if there's anything that the board can do or recommend about that, or maybe just here in the room, if any of you guys wanted to get together and maybe form another board, or we can change it statutory if we get the right people in the right people's heads about it. But
it's also in the task force record.
Okay, I got to read that thing. Okay, yeah. So that's really good. So we're on the same page. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Yes, I would like to point out that the task force did address the socioeconomic reality of expensive medical cannabis, which many patients cannot afford, and so there's broad interest throughout the state in allowing collective cultivation and patient care collectives, and as I mentioned earlier in this meeting, allowing donation of medicine. I think all of these things would contribute to improving both the affordability and the accessibility of medical cannabis throughout the state, which was the purpose of the task force. I'm very, very excited about this task force report. So urge you guys to check it out and talk amongst yourselves as advocates.
Can you say the name of it one more time? So
Sure, it's Senate Memorial 105.
Okay.
And you can literally probably Google that. I haven't done that, but you could Google that. And then the report would be there for you to read.
Did you say it was being heard today at the legislature at a committee hearing?
I understood that from Nat or Sarah. Did you mention that?
Human Services.
It's been heard in 2 different legislative venues already. Because it was initially to address the affordability and accessibility of medical cannabis, especially among Native American peoples, many of whom who live on federal land who don't have access to medical cannabis. That is the initial, from Picuris Pueblo, that was the initial impetus for this task force. But obviously there are broader issues that affect all New Mexicans, and so the task force took it from there. So it's been heard twice legislatively, and it sounds like it's going to be heard in a couple of venues. I wasn't there at those legislative hearings, but I understand that they went very positively from the perspective of medical cannabis advocates.
Hi, y'all know me. I'm Ginger Grider. I'm from the New Mexico Medical Cannabis Patient Advocates Alliance. And if you don't know me, please come and get a card from me. If you're a medical professional or a patient, we have the task force. Our board was on the task force, and we have the task force copy up in our group in our files. And if anyone wants to get involved, I got with Jenna earlier, and we talked extensively with Gina with the Cannabis Nurses Association, and we're going to start doing education with doctors and nurses, going to them so that your providers know something better than nothing. And anyone who wants to be involved, please get involved. We need people all around the state. It's our program. It's dependent upon us. These fine ladies and gentlemen can only do so much. They can't make our medicine cheaper. They can't make the Secretary of Health provide signatures off on stuff. They've done everything that they can, and the rest of it is up to all of us doing advocacy work. So I encourage you all to get involved in advocacy in any way you can. Everything counts. A phone call, an email, everything counts. So let's all get together and work together to make it better. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ginger.
Dr. Valerie Kubelian.
Hello. I just want to reiterate one or two points and actually stress something very important I heard from, don't remember your name, about pesticides. So first, I am just onboarding onto looking at this whole process and how it's set up. And I do want to thank you all for your work, which is, I understand. I was the legislative expert for the not this past year, but the year before, when we were trying to get everything recreational passed. And I do want to convey to you guys that when I was in front of the Judiciary Committee explaining actual brain science to them and how things work, they all completely voted to say opiates yes under cannabis. My understanding from then talking with the rest of the legislature was that the rest of them, actually every committee that I explained to, all voted solidly for it. And everyone who did not understand it voted against it. And so first I just want to reiterate whether or not we form a group or we're educating or the task force, you guys specifically actually recommend that there is a need or a requirement for them to understand these basic things. But it's kind of like tech. We know they're making bad mistakes about tech because they don't understand tech. So in the same vein, you understand as professionals that they won't have your understanding of how these systems work. And it's the systems themselves, for instance, the opiates and their other impacts on the gut and destruction of everything else, that is not really understood. So I'm kind of, one of you, I believe it was you, sir, expressed a desire to expand the role of this group. And I would oh my God, that sounds like heaven, simply because we are at a position where the entire country is changing and you guys are at a place where we'll have a different DOH head, and perhaps if the people in New Mexico can get our act together to back you up specifically, then you can expand your role to be much more beneficial to actually, I mean, we could be getting tons of grants from the feds to actually be doing this research ourselves, and we already have that at UNM to some extent. But I did want to ask, in that expanded role, just for the harm reduction component, people do not know there are side effects, there are issues, there are panic attacks, there are certain people shouldn't do these things. I'm not seeing anything about who should or shouldn't do it, warning signs, risk factors. I have not gone and looked at everything except for the literature, I admit, but I'm concerned about that. And my other concern is, I'm not sure if there is a missing piece or just that I don't know what it is, but I am concerned because I'm looking at I'm a consultant only, but people come in to look at their medications and everything, and I see that people are using pesticides. They're reporting ones that are supposedly all right, and we sort of know what those do, but truthfully, I have had things tested and found other things in them. And I feel like this is a role of harm reduction that could be greatly taken up by, and even propose almost a national kind of standard for this, because if people are smoking something that's then causing lung cancer, then we're not doing harm reduction. So aside from thanking you for everything, please, I would encourage you to expand your role. This is a huge opportunity, and I think we all know that this could solve other problems as well. So thanks very much.
Thank you. If I may, I just want to mention in my role as a clinician who has done medical cannabis certifications for many years, that is a part of my job as a physician to make sure that I present informed consent. I explain the medical risks and benefits of medical cannabis, and that is part of my job, to educate before I proceed with my certification. So that, I mean, I suspect that my colleagues would do the same thing and do the same thing. So I do believe that any patient that's being medically certified by many of my colleagues would hopefully understand that there are risks and benefits to the use of medical cannabis, just like there are for any medication.
Well, I applaud that. I'm just hearing from people who are consulting me. In other words, they're not calling their primary care physicians who gave them a prescription when they have an actual full-on
primary care provider does not provide a prescription for medical cannabis. In New Mexico, they only certify that a particular patient has a medical qualifying condition or not.
Okay.
In order to get that, there's no prescription of medical cannabis in the state of New Mexico.
Recommendation.
It is
a recommendation. Yeah. What I'm saying, though, is that we are not getting feedback from people who are having problems with these things because of both stigma and I just applied for a cannabis card. I've had 4 car accidents. I wish I'd had that 20 years ago, but I've stayed off of it to simply observe everything kind of scientifically. And now I'm going through the process, and there's not that much information. There's not a lot of support in what do you do if you have any problems. I mean, perhaps you are all far more educated than every other medical professional on that, and I say that truthfully, and not in a disparaging way, but simply because neurochemistry and neuropharmacology are not very standard for physicians to have at a deep level of understanding. And because of that, my concern is that people are not quite understanding the power of these drugs. I'm getting people who are calling me who said, I'm an experienced tripper and I've been smoking for 30 years and I'm in the middle of a full-on panic attack, what do I do? And so what I'm asking you is, we're setting up a system, do we have a way to deal with all of these things because of the stigma? In other words, I literally know, I asked my primary care physician, if someone called her with that, what would she do? She said, I don't know.
I think these are excellent points. I'm really glad to hear from you about this. When I hear this, though, I go back to the medical cannabis program understaffing issue. I mean, Dr. Leah Roberts is an incredible medical cannabis resource for the medical cannabis program as their medical director. And I'm going to say again, for the record, in my 6 years of being here, she's the only medical director who's ever attended these meetings regularly. So I applaud Dr. Roberts. So, if the medical cannabis program was adequately staffed, it is a robustly growing program, as we all know, in terms of patient numbers. I mean, they're all working overtime to comply with the law, which just says that they have to respond to a new patient application within 30 days, right? And they're doing an incredible job, but working overtime, and therefore unable to provide the desperately needed ongoing medical education of medical providers and the public alike throughout the state. That Jenna back there and Leah they do presentations, but they need to be staffed up there in order to be able to focus more on those important aspects of their jobs.
Great. So what I'm hearing is that if all of us want to do something with the people, one of the things we should ask for, demand, and recommend or require is fully staff this program so that it can be successful, because otherwise it just looks like a political move to not do that.
With
so
that's right. Increase staff commensurate with the increase in program numbers. I mean, I just think it should be tied. It should be a formula. I mean, so just like as you all know, I'm a major advocate for adequate supply of medical cannabis throughout the state. And when you have increasing patient numbers, right, and relatively flat or fixed supply of medical cannabis, we have a problem here, right? So I think that also should be addressed as well. Commensurate, increase in the supply of medical cannabis to address the increased patient program numbers, right? Staffing and supply.
Excellent. Just one quick follow-up, and I apologize for taking up so much time, but you had mentioned that you can't meet any other time than these 2 board meetings. And so I want to ask you a direct question, which is that if the people in this room set up, say, a journal club, a discussion club, a listserv that was just looking at cannabis articles and discussing them, is that something that, as private citizens, we can simply invite you to join? You can observe, you can participate, you don't have to?
We're all looking at Chris Woodward at this very moment.
So this is a topical question. So we had some internal discussions about this very question, and so as a board, this advisory board is bound by the Open Meetings Act. There's some legal question about that, but the Attorney General's office has taken a very steadfast position on this, that advisory boards created by statute are bound by the Open Meetings Act. And if you look in the Open Meetings Act guide that's available on the web from the Attorney General's office, they talk about something called rolling quorums, which is this idea that if members of a board are discussing the substance of what they would otherwise be discussing at a meeting outside of the meeting, they call it a rolling quorum. So the quorum for this board is all of 3 people, which is usually a good thing because it means that the board can meet even if only 3 people are available. The drawback of that is that means that only 2 members of the board can discuss the substance or the merits of any petitions outside of these meetings. Now, they can have more than 2 meetings if they want. They're required to have 2 meetings every year, at least 2 meetings. They could have more meetings if they wanted to. But in terms of sort of journaling and that sort of thing, all of the members individually tend to do their own research on these things once a petition comes in. And I gather that they will share that research with one another. It's the discussions, sort of the discussions of the merits of whether a given petition should be approved, or discussion of the content of those journal articles outside of this open forum that, on the face of it, the Attorney General's office is saying is prohibited. So they can do a lot of prep, but as far as having those kind of in-depth discussions, they're supposed to have it in a public forum like this. The idea being having more openness and transparency.
Sounds really anti-scientific to me.
Actually, it is a very, unfortunately, science doesn't work that way. So if I could make a suggestion, I'm sure we would all love, and perhaps this could work for multiple causes or address multiple issues. Perhaps you could call one other meeting during the summer, which is literally a scientific meeting where it's like, sure, the public can come, but here's the list of the journal, here's the 300 journal articles we're going to be discussing, and frankly, you just guys have a scientific discussion. Why not go?
The way I understand it, thank you, Chris, as always, for your legal interpretation. I think probably what would be allowable would be for only 1 or 2 of us potentially to be involved in a gathering of this sort. As quite frankly, in our role as Medical Cannabis Advisory Board members, what I'm not clear about and would love some clarification is I assume that we are allowed to do things as private citizens.
Yes.
Right.
So it's not keeping you from doing anything but discussing the petitions in another place. But you can discuss cannabis anywhere you want.
Is that right, Chris?
Well, okay, so...
Not to put you on the spot or anything like that.
Civil rights attorney on that.
So I think that it's a good point that as private citizens, it sort of comes back to the question of the business of the board and what the board does as its business, sort of reviewing petitions, discussing the substance and the merits of the petitions and the journal articles that you're reviewing. That is all sort of part of this open process. Outside of that, you can do what you want as private citizens in the same way that, you know, if 3 of you happen to run into each other on the street and you start talking with one another, there's no problem on the face of that. It's just if you start getting into the merits of what you would otherwise be presenting here.
So it's petition specific then?
I think it's petition specific.
Okay, that's important clarification.
Because the business of the board is to receive petitions. I guess it could be broader than that if you're anticipating, for example, I mean, sometimes the board makes recommendations about what should be added to department rule. And so that may or may not be petition specific. If you were having those discussions, like if you knew that you were anticipating a vote on something like that, and you were having that discussion privately, it could be problematic.
That's right.
And just one other point about this. So you are sort of stuck having two people and no more discussing those things outside of this open forum, members of the board. But in terms of discussions with representatives from the Department of Health, there's no such limitation. So if you wanted to meet with Leah or with other representatives from the medical cannabis program, there's no problem there. It's just the board membership communicating that.
I guess I'm confused. It seems like I'm hearing two things. First, I was hearing that it would be okay, for example, for the 6 of us to have a journal club as long as we weren't discussing specific petitions or things that were to be voted on. Because this is, I mean, so then this would provide the collegial forum that we all want, quite frankly, to increase our knowledge of medical cannabis broadly defined.
Is it a journal club to review stuff that is before the board, or is it just broadly to look at what kind of literature is out there?
Yeah, just talk cannabis.
Just talk cannabis, so the latter.
The latest research, the latest cannabis
Right.
research.
I mean, these articles have come up since we last met. I mean, it keeps us educated and informed. And as we've heard today, I mean, it's a rapidly changing field. It's very exciting. It's very important to all of us.
I think if it's not, if it's not something that you anticipate taking a vote on, particularly.
Well, we can't know,
well,
in advance of what,
What I'm saying is, if you can know, if you can anticipate that something's coming up, then you want to avoid it.
Right,
But
it makes sense.
Otherwise, as far as just keeping yourself apprised of what the recent medical literature says, I don't know that there's an issue there.
Okay, and then in addition, though, it sounds as if as Medical Cannabis Advisory Board members, but also private citizens, more than 2 of us could meet with public as private citizens. Again, obviously not to discuss petitions coming up. I think we all have enough professional integrity that we're not going to do that. But I mean, is that right?
I think that's right. I think it just gets back to what the business of the board is.
Right.
And whether what you're discussing is sort of the business of the board that you anticipate coming up.
Okay.
Along this venue, I'd like to ask Kenny a question. We had discussed before about them having a budget to
Trisha,
be
we
able...
have some folks waiting to do
Oh,
public
sorry.
comment. I'd be happy to call you back up
No,
as
you're
we get through these folks. Is that
Girl,
okay?
I will take your time.
I'm in my moment. Let's make this fun.
We are having fun.
If you guys are the Medical Cannabis Advisory Board, you should be the most knowledgeable individuals in the entire state about medical cannabis, in my opinion.
Thank you.
That's possible.
Thanks for saying that. We appreciate hearing it.
To be that doesn't take, it's not you going online and researching on your own. It takes community. It takes all of us together to educate you and to educate all of us. It's a reciprocal relationship we have with the cannabis plant.
Well, it's also my personal and professional preference to work collaboratively. I mean, we are multidisciplinary, and that's what makes this worthwhile, and why we want to keep doing this important work.
Winnie, let's go, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for your patience.
Thank you. I deeply appreciate the opportunity to come here and speak today in front of you guys. Thank you for everything that you're doing. I am, and everybody involved in the medical cannabis program, all that they're doing, advocacy. I am a health professional. I am also a patient. I am a 20-year licensed respiratory care practitioner that has been advocating for safe inhalation and aerosol practices in the medical cannabis industry. I am also involved in the hemp industry as well as CBD and cannabinoid research with cystic fibrosis, Rady's cystic fibrosis in Children's Clinic in San Diego, as well as research scientist on some stuff that I'm going to be launching hopefully in the next year that's going to make a difference for people and condition-specific relief. The reason why I wanted to speak today from a healthcare professional perspective is to say thank you guys so much. From what I'm hearing, which is something I don't think much of us have heard before, is that openness that you guys are having to the conditions and the symptoms and hearing the patients. So thank you for that. I'm highly passionate about what I do. I am also New Mexico's state captain for the National COPD Foundation. We have 160,000 chronic lung patients here in New Mexico. We don't have 160,000 chronic beds if they get sick. One of the things that we're looking at is the pesticides, thank you, Doctor, for bringing that up, and the quality of cannabis and standards that we're going to need for chemicals and anything that's going to cause our population to get sicker. If we're looking at this as true medicine, medicinal, we need to have greater standards. I judged a competition recently on the quality of flour, and to be honest with you, there was mold. There were the chemicals, the quality of the flour coming from LMPPs was disparaging. So I just wanted to say that that's something that I hope that as medical professionals we can look at how things are going to affect patients, not just that they're getting symptom relief. Bringing this back to, please let me circle back to, thank you, Doctor, for being pro on the one that you guys were... Yes, thank you so much for that. The reason why I say thank you is because I also have a professional career in the hospice industry here in New Mexico. Everybody knows that somebody's going to get a diagnosis and their prognosis and trajectory is within 6 months, that they may still be alive or not. That takes a lot of compassion to smile on the face of somebody looking at death. So I do that every day with a smile, but I'm also a patient. I also deal with these patients who are dealing with symptom management. So let me ask you this, and I'm going to challenge you guys, please, from the bottom of my heart, to consider every condition that people propose and petition for that symptom management. Don't just focus on the condition, please, because if one person will find relief from suffering, which I see daily, multiple times a day, I may see 20 patients. I consult people. You know, I'm there. I am also the person that started a respiratory at home on a ventilator, working with ALS patients, neuromuscular patients. So it's finding relief and finding solutions for treatment and condition relief, pain relief, symptom relief. So what I'm going to ask is please, 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 when these conditions are brought to your attention, please consider that if it's one symptom that cannabis can give a relief to, it could save a life because they're at that threshold of, why do I need to live like this? So please do not deny one person the relief from a symptom just because you're looking at a condition as a whole. Let's dig a little deeper as a community. And really, if one of you guys were sitting here and you had that condition and somebody denied it, but you knew that it gave you relief, you would be disgruntled, you would be hurt, and you would be let down at the fact that you are going to have to take something from Big Pharma that could make you sicker. And please don't deny people that opportunity to make that choice for an alternative treatment option. Thank you kindly so much.
If I may, I just wanted to circle back around to what we've talked about several times already about, quite frankly, the need for someone to bring a petition forward that gives that discretion to an individual medical practitioner working with an individual patient to recommend certification for medical cannabis, any condition that they think that the patient will benefit from.
Thank you guys so much.
Hi, I'm Larry Love. I'm a patient. I'm a patient advocate and advocate for the program. We're all here twice a year and in between to make changes, to try and make good changes to this program to make it better. There's an old joke. How many psychiatrists does it take to change a light bulb? 0. The light bulb has to want to change. I'm hoping with the new administration we will have a better program. Thank you.
I just wanted to ask Kenny, pay for them to have access to have any medical journal, research, online, whatever. They should never be paying to research for stuff. I mean, we collect fees, we do all of this, so they need to have a budget for research. Is there some way, how do we do that? How do we go about making sure they don't have to pay for their own research? Do you know?
We can look into that. I'm not sure what the Open Meetings Act requires as part of per diem for volunteer boards, but something we can look, and there may be something accessible through DOH as well. So we can certainly look into
Because I know that had been a thing before where you hadn't been able to access them like 5 meetings ago or something.
My understanding is from relatively remote history, there is a per diem available for travel for those coming from outside of Santa Fe, also Albuquerque, or not? I don't remember.
Yeah. Yes. We'll need to look into that. We'll follow up with you.
Okay.
Okay, any other public comments? Nobody else has signed up?
I would like to say
Just one?
Well,
You just did. Come on, Sarah.
My name is Sarah Dole. I'm a patient since 2013. I also serve on the board of a LNPP. I would like to personally thank all of you new members. I'm usually here at all these meetings. I wasn't here in September when you were inducted into the Patient Hall of Fame. And that's exactly what it is. Because many patients don't know about you, but the ones that do, you are our heroes. And I want to thank you all for serving, for volunteering. I also want to reiterate the pesticide thing. I have autoimmune disease, and I will only buy product from where I work because I know what's in it. And reiterate also that there is a lot of bad medicine out there. But not only the practice of not testing for pesticides, but making licensed producers say whether the pesticides are you thinking they're really going to do that? They're not going to do it. The other thing is testing. The reason there was so much moldy medicine showing up was because there is no real protocol of testing. People can see mold on this part of their plant, pull a bud off of this part of the plant, and send it in for testing. And I do plan on coming up with a proposal for that for the next meeting. Thank you all.
Thank you, Sarah.
Just as a reminder to patients, if you do get moldy product, we have investigators, we're hiring an environmental scientist that will happily look into that for you. Our investigators, very proactive, how's that? So she will respond to all those complaints. There's actually a complaint form online, is that correct? That you could fill out and submit, and she will contact you. Okay?
If I could briefly follow up on just...
Well, hold on one second. We're going to go in order here.
So that's all I want to say. I don't know who these people are except for Dr. Brown. Because I don't know when they're speaking who they are.
Jolie Kleinhans, nice to meet you.
Thanks.
Thank you for seeing me here. I wanted to touch on a couple of different things. One of them was I appreciate that you guys and your willingness to go ahead and accept a statute that would qualify any condition that a doctor recommends, because it's really sad. I've worked in the industry.
A healthcare practitioner, actually.
Healthcare practitioner,
anybody
absolutely.
who can prescribe.
I've worked in the industry personally, and I have seen people that have come in. I've seen active law enforcement come in and actually just look like they woke up on a corner. Look absolutely terrible. And this person was very secretive, very quiet, but he got cannabis, and he was able to get it from where I worked at. And when I saw him 6 months later, he looked like a whole new man. And I was able to tell him, I was like, dude, man, you looked really, really bad last time I saw you. And he was like, this is what helped me. He was on the verge of just not having anything, losing his career. Now he's on the verge of, having to keep it secret and everything to not lose his career. One of the other things I wanted to ask about is when you do that, is there a way that you guys can affect change with access to law enforcement, first responders, military? I have a wife who was in EMS for 23 years. She is at home. She works for HP, but even that she can't do just because she broke herself, taking care of everybody else and fixing everybody else, and there is no support from the company which she worked for. There's nothing. When they're done, they can't file for workers' comp. They can't do anything. There's maybe here or there a counselor that specifies in it, but there isn't really actually anything that says, no, you guys gave us your all. Here's what we're going to do for you. And I know that there are states that have done that, so it's not a federal issue. There are states that do protect access to law enforcement and first responders and stuff. So I was just wondering if there was anything on y'all's level, or is that a statute thing that we would have to do as well?
That's great.
Thank you.
I don't understand.
You're trying, I'm sorry, can you re-ask your question, the last
So
one?
what I want to know is if you guys were to, let's say, it was to pass, there was a statute that passed that says based on whatever a doctor says, you can get
or nurse
healthcare
practitioner
provider,
or physician
healthcare
assistant.
provider recommends that you can get this based on this condition. Is there a way that there can be something in action that says it doesn't matter if you're law enforcement, it doesn't matter if you are a protection, yes, for first responders, based on the occupation, so that those that need it the most, I have so many, exactly, I have so many law enforcement officers, I have so many friends in the EMS and the fire department, they all tell me, I'm going to come see you when you're retired. Even CBD can help them, and most of them are blocked from that, and that's ridiculous.
I will tell you that the task force that I keep referring to did address employment and housing discrimination issues in its recommendations.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time.
My name's Angelina, and I also worked in the industry on the grow side, and so I keep hearing pesticides come up, and unfortunately for the two different LNPPs I worked with, I didn't even work with the manager, I worked with them personally, and ultimately, from a patient perspective, I asked, why, and what about, other options, and they said, this industry has created, or the regulations has created an industry of cheaters, and so they know all the loopholes, and I was actually doing stuff that I couldn't agree with. I had left a very well-paying job, something I loved, and I wanted to contribute in a positive way, and unfortunately, it didn't line up with my morals or why I got into it, and so I left. And now I work for cannabis, and I'm staffing for a little bit, and I'm just helping with education and getting the information out there and teaching people to grow their own and ask those difficult questions to your landlord if it means that you know what is in your medicine. So I don't know, I just wanted to kind of add that from a personal perspective. That was it was disheartening, some of the stuff they have in it. And when the DOH shows up for these surprise visits, we are texted and told to lock this door, turn off these lights, stash this, and it's terrible. It's not being regulated the way it's supposed to be, and there's something that should or can, and maybe more petitions is what I'm learning from this experience. Lots of petitions to be made, so it's on petition.
Thank you.
Anybody else have public comments?
I just wanted to add a smidge to what she was saying, along with the grow. It's the same way with edibles. I've worked for LNPPs, and I have actually seen candy that's been expired get sent back to the manufacturer and get relabeled. And because in their eyes, there's nothing in it that can go bad. And that's disgusting to me. When I was trying to sell something, and I'm like,
And most of the edibles is from extractions from the moldy bud that they
they're
can't
using
sell
to
in
get
the
rid of.
dispensary. So there's that too.
Well, one suggestion I can make is please file these complaints when it's happening. It doesn't help us when after you leave, because what happens, you're considered a disgruntled employee. Make sure you're filing this complaint. If you see mold, call us, let us know. We have been known to send people out immediately to go to their grow locations. So please, and I get what you're saying, I wish I could control behavior, but we can't, that's why I didn't go to Hogwarts. But, we please encourage patients to let us know. We're not here to punish people, but we want to make sure you all have access to safe product. So I'm going to go to this young lady. You had a question or comment?
I think I already said it, but it's hard to identify these people without, especially as the panel changes and we come and we don't know them, and it would be great if there was just some placards on the table to tell us.
I actually have those on order. I was hoping to have them before this meeting, so, but Best Laid Plans was interfered with by process.
Do you need us to reintroduce ourselves? Would that be helpful at this point?
I'm not.
Go ahead. I want to know your name.
Yeah, I'm sitting here going red shirt, red tie.
Go ahead.
Guys,
thank you.
Go ahead and reintroduce if you would. Thanks.
Hi, my name is David Logue. I'm an anesthesia-trained pain management specialist, boarded in both. I'm part of the pain program at Christus. I'm a very big proponent of safe use. I don't know how young everyone is, but I went to medical school about 30 years ago, and I'm learning so many new fantastic things as part of this program with researching everyone's petition. I'm very concerned about the pesticide issue. The question is, what standards and who would enforce them?
Thank you.
And I'm Chris Calder. I'm a neurologist, board-certified neurologist at UNM. I'm interested in headache, I'm interested in nerve, I'm interested in neurologic education, I'm interested in safe and rational use of everything. And, you know, I think there's evidence that marijuana causes brain atrophy. There's evidence that opiates do. There's evidence that non-steroidals do. We've been giving aspirin to people for primary prevention of stroke and heart attack for a long time. But turns out that's not such a bright idea. And there will continue to be changes in medicine for the foreseeable future. Maybe we'll get to a point where we will know what sort of receptors people have for various neurochemicals and other drugs, but we don't know those things. So a lot of what we have to do is sort of what works, what doesn't work, what works in an individual patient. And I think one of the things that always makes me a little angry, not just about marijuana, but about lots of things, is that, you know, I use a lot of medications that are so-called off-label. If you took those away from me, I would be particularly neurologically impotent. And so I think it's important that we sort of use things provided they're relatively safe. So that's sort of where I pretty much come from. I would love to see a lot more data. I'd love to see a lot more long-term studies. But we don't have that information, which makes this particularly difficult. Okay? And difficult to sell to others who may not share the views or be as open-minded.
Thank you.
I'm Dr. Laura Brown, as you all know. I'm board certified in family medicine, about to be board certified in addiction medicine also. As you all know, I'm passionate about harm reduction, medical cannabis, and affordability and accessibility for all New Mexicans.
Thank you.
I'm Dr. Annette Fontaine, board certified in hematology and medical oncology. So I treat patients with all types of cancers, and I've been using medical cannabis for management of pain related to cancer, nausea, vomiting, neuropathy, a host of symptoms.
Thank you.
And I'm Baylin Schwartz. I'm a board certified in physical medicine and rehabilitation, also called physiatry. I have a pain management subspecialty, and I'm currently a medical director for Heritage Hospice. So I'm doing end-of-life care as well. And as a physiatrist, I treat people with chronic pain a lot, as well as a lot of neurologic and debilitating issues.
Gentleman in the hat, and then Mr. Gonzalez.
Just got a quick question. I noticed that the licensure to become a producer has been closed for a while. I was just wondering, is there any time that the application process can open up again, or?
I would refer that question to the program. Anybody want to?
We don't have a time frame right now, so it remains closed.
What about cooperatives?
Yeah, co-ops.
Task force.
Certainly that could change depending on what happens in our next legislative session. So stay tuned.
Okay, Mr. Gonzalez?
I'm just going to take my shot here because my question is kind of personal, because I heard two things, like there's a lot of advocates in here who are passionate about this, but then there's a shortage of people working in the program, like paid. So I'm like, you want to work for the program, go get paid for it. So of course, why am I not doing it? And it's because of my status as a veteran. It doesn't, I can't be gainfully employed. So that's been my whole problem. Since you two gentlemen are in the room, can I volunteer there 40 hours a week and get a stipend, and maybe a per diem, my permanent address? I live in Santa Fe, but my permanent address is in Socorro, and I have a couple of degrees and stuff. I'd like to work for you, but
so we have to take a look at this.
Volunteer for you.
We had an employee ask to volunteer for community service, and state personnel office rules won't allow that. So I'm not sure, but I can look into it. I can give you my number and.
Yeah, I just didn't want you to skedaddle after, so this is purely personal. Thank you.
You have one last comment?
Oh, yes, thank you. Sorry, guys, but thank you so much. One of the things that I wanted to say was, you know, we're all looking at the legalization and going recreation at some point. This is an opportunity for us to really fine-tune this program and bring those quality, the quality and the standard in this medical program and protect the patient as this being truly medicinal. If we don't wrap this up and tighten it and set, you know, some kind of a standard for the medical program, we're looking in, as we all know, that when something goes illegal, you've got everybody in their garage growing stuff, and things are going to be out there on the street that may make everybody here a lot sicker than what they currently are trying to treat themselves for. So we have that opportunity, and I think we all know that, to try and make this what we need, and it could be the model that we kind of use for standards in the legalization when it happens. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you. And if I may, I think we can feel fortunate that we have neighbors close to the north in Colorado that we can learn from, positive and negative, about their experience with recreational versus medical cannabis. So I think it's, thank you for raising that issue. I'm very concerned and also excited about the possibility of making sure that we do it right when it happens.
Very good. Thank you guys.
Thank you. We're very respectful of the board members. Last one. Anybody else? This is your last one.
Alright, sorry. This will be quick. I just want to make sure that we protect the plant itself, because when we start trying to take it apart in parts and pieces, it does not work for us. It is meant to be a whole plant medicine, and I would like to see, as we move forward with its medical uses, we protect it as a whole plant rather than trying to pick apart its components of CBD and CBG and THC. It only works cohesively as one, and as us human beings do too. So that is it.
Thank you.
Okay, that is the end of public comments. Yes, that is the end of public
So before we can adjourn, I think we do need to talk about when our next public hearing date is. As I had mentioned earlier, now that we are a quorum, I think we can go back to a previous schedule depending on what works best for you guys. In the past, we've met in April and October, or April and November. I think probably 6 months, April and October would probably be better. But I'm open to your suggestions. If we were thinking about that, potentially Friday, April 5th or Friday, April 12th are Friday, April dates for us to consider, or the 19th or the 26th. Does the program have a perspective on what date works best?
Whatever works best for the board is fine.
April 20th. I think 420 is probably not a good idea.
Or it may be appropriate. Yeah.
We're going to be busy.
Yeah. Yeah. So, do you guys have a preference in a Friday, April?
We're going to be busy. Yeah, we'll be busy that day.
Preferably earlier in the month, I think.
Okay. So April 5th or April 12th? Which one?
Can't do the 12th.
I can't do the 5th or the 12th.
Okay, so then what about the 19th? April 19th? The day before?
Yeah, that would be good. That'd be great. Then we could get patients to come up to the meeting, and then maybe they'd come up to the meeting in anticipation of coming up for a celebration.
That's Good Friday, if that makes a difference.
Oh, April 19th is? Okay, so then we should do April 26th. April 26th. Going. No, just kidding. What? April 26th is okay?
I don't think that works for me.
Okay.
And
April 26th, yes, no? For you guys?
All of April is like,
what's that?
Every Friday in April I've got something.
Oh, you do? Okay, well, okay, so now I'm hearing at least 2 of the 5 of us can't do April dates or April 26th. May 3rd? May 3rd?
I cannot do May 3rd.
No.
You can't do May 3rd?
I'm also maybe aware of the meeting.
Okay, May 10th? May 10th, Friday, May 10th.
Probably works.
Friday, May 10th. Yes, yes.
I'm in Gallup Clinic.
Oh.
You can't do it?
I like how you guys work.
What works best for you, Annette?
Looks like May 17th.
Okay, now I'm hearing Friday, May 17th.
Probably.
Yeah, I'm available.
Annette, does that work for you?
Yeah.
Okay, so it sounds like Friday, May 17th works best. Thank you all so much for being here today, as always. I really appreciate all of the conversation, the discussion, the thoughtful comments that we have, and the collaboration that I perceive in this room. And I really appreciate all the program is doing. And so I guess with that, I have to go back to my script. Closing remarks. The Medical Cannabis Advisory Board would like to thank the witnesses who participated today and those who provided written comments. The audience is reminded that the recommendations of the Medical Cannabis Advisory Board will be submitted to the Secretary of the Department of Health for final determination. Applicants will be notified within 10 days after the Secretary makes his or her determination. And with that, I think we are adjourned at approximately 12:35. Thank you all. Have a great weekend.